Okay, looks like we're live.
Okay. Meg, do you want to take the lead or do you want me to lead in on this?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So, as we all know, we had a discovery during preparation for the Townsend side of our current project that discovered that we have a replacement needed regarding the old 1935 gypsum flooring. So tonight is to review, discuss the various work and proposals that Scott and Mike, BCA and CNS have come up with for us. And then we can have, we'll have conversations and give us a direction of where we need to move forward to. So Scott or Mike, I don't know who.
We lost you there for a second, Mike.
Good.
You there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Okay. So who's gonna talk through it? Scott or Mike? Who's taking the lead?
Well,
Scott,
you
I have.
want me to give an opening and then you jump
Yeah.
in with the numbers?
Yeah,
Let's
that
do
works. Yep.
Let's do that. So just for background refresher, we had work in the project scheduled to sort of repair the gypsum floor deck over at Townsend at the second floor, and we had also looked at the area under the gym. And so in the process of sort of going back and confirming those areas, we found that the gypsum deck on the second floor in particular had deteriorated a lot faster than we had expected since the last time we had looked at it in 2017. And so long story short, we decided that as a team, we would look at this and provide the district some options as to what could be done with that. You may recall that portion of that floor was replaced on the first floor back in a previous project back in the early 2000s. And so, basically what we did was we decided to look at the worst area, which was the 4 classrooms up on the second floor on one side of the corridor towards the parking lot. We said, let's look at that area because that's the worst. And then we gave a scope of work to CNS to put together an estimate on. And we also said, let's look at the entire second floor of the 35 wing because it's the same construction. And we said, let's understand what we're looking at, the entire magnitude of that. And then we also said, we've got the same type of deck underneath the gym there as well. And so we said, let's look at that and determine what that pricing might be. So our team, led by Bill Gorham, who's on the call here with us, put together some documents as to what would need to be done. And we sent those over to Mike's team at CNS, and they reviewed it and have put together some estimates. So I'll turn it over to Mike maybe to talk about that.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. I'll share my screen. The estimates that we did were off of the schematic design drawings that were prepared by BCA and Bill's team. And so I'll just show you, these are the summary pages right here. I won't get into the details of the estimate. I believe it was probably 35 pages long, if I remember right. But Scott mentioned the 3 options. So option 1 was the partial second floor replacement. And that estimate for construction cost is, and there's escalations built in those costs and in our estimates for just because we're at the schematic design phase. And so there's further work that needs to be done on the drawings to bring that design tighter. so the first second floor replacement was 704,000. The full second floor, about 1.5 million, a little over 1.5 million. And then the gym floor replacement was close to 600,000 on top of that. So that's a quick summary of where the estimates are. And so I guess the discussion tonight would be is, how do we want to move forward with this and what's the best approach financially? And I believe the district and BCA and CNS have been and had some of those conversations. So I think that's where we are tonight.
So a key aspect to our discussion, Mike, if you could unshare.
Yep.
It is we don't believe in conversation that this would constitute an emergency project for that, even just those 4 classrooms. So it pushes it back to where do we go from here? We had discussions ranging from, do we adjust the current scope? Do we take things out, build this in just the 4? What do we do? In discussions with the board and the district since I've been there, it's been very, very apparent and clear that we want to make sure that we maintain the sanctitude of this project as presented to the taxpayers. This scope is that we look at the upstairs, only the classrooms upstairs, classroom and hallway, that one, and that we look at it as another project, $1.5 million project, and that we go out and we explain it to our taxpayers and our community, and we ask for their support given this new discovery. The gypsum that's underneath the gym, that wood has life. That floor has usable life. I would hate to tear up a gym that it's not deteriorated to this level and important. We can get multiple years out of this, potentially to the next point of needing the project in 7 years. Is that a fair statement, Scott? We don't know, correct?
Yeah, we don't know that for sure. There has been cracking in that floor, and there has been repairs done to that floor over time. I think how long that's going to remain or the rate of acceleration is really hard to know at this point. It is in better shape, though, certainly, than the second floor portion.
And it's on a first floor, which is
first floor, right. And the other thing to note, one of the things that we looked at as a team was, this idea of doing half of it or doing all of the second floor. And the concern with doing just half of it, quite frankly, is the amount of demolition that would happen up there to remove the deck under that those 4 classrooms would probably cause enough disturbance and vibration throughout the rest of that floor that it really, I think both BCA and CNS's opinion and I think the district administration's opinion too is that if you're going to do that second floor work, we ought to tackle that as one project, because you're probably going to damage that other deck in the process.
So that's my thought, is that I think our current project is just too tight of a scope that may require us to do some adjustments on scope as we move forward as it is. To add this into the mix on that and to tighten that up any further or adjust it any further is going to really change it quite a bit. So open it up for discussion. Kevin looks like he's on the edge of his chair to say something there, I can tell.
So, not necessarily, just squirming. Hey, so I guess one of the questions I'd have for you is with this gypsum, from my understanding of it, it's not a structural integrity strength like a regular poured cement. So is the removal of this still the same process, jackhammers, or is this less invasive that way to remove this? I'm just trying to evaluate that we did half of this building has been done on that second floor. And the gypsum flooring is going bad, yet there's a layer over it that now we found will buy us some time with this. So I guess the long story short for me is I don't feel there's any room in the current project to add this into it. I think we went out, really beat the drums hard on the public that we were going to be straight up with them. And this project is what we were going after. I don't think we can renege on that. I think we would have to have further discussions on whether or not we do half the floor versus the whole floor. I'd probably like to kick that can a little bit farther, but I think they're two separate projects personally.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Kevin. To me, they seem like two different projects. We were very clear right up front that we were very tight on the scope of this project, and I don't want to really detract from that. Are we still away from the idea that 3/4 inch plywood provides us additional security to be able to re-inhabit those classrooms or not?
Well, Scott sent us,
Oh, you cut out there, Mike. I sent a note to the district and said, based on the where you stand right now, you can use those rooms with the plywood that's down there and the topping that's over top of that.
Yeah, I read that. But what I'm thinking about is longevity, though. Like, if we're discussing something like a 7-year project, do we need to do additional reinforcement to those sections to get to the 7-year time frame to a new project? Is I guess really the question.
I think, based on the amount of deterioration that has happened in the last 4 years, I think that would be pushing it, to be honest with you. That's my thought anyway.
Well, to me, if we can come off with the the one that we have proposed currently, and be successful with this one, that will buy us a lot of longevity with the community. And even if we didn't have to wait the 7 years, even if we turn around and say in a year or 2 years after this project was finished, or we start even working on a third project, if we'll call this, let me call the Florida's third project. We have the 2-phase one coming up now that we're working into. We get this one done, we could be designing the third and then come out and say, listen, this is where we're at. This is the duration we're at. And I think it would be easier to go forward with the public support, with having a positive track record behind us. I don't necessarily know if we'd have to give it a long period of wait, but I think we need to achieve that positive track record behind us. And then I think we would probably have the support. We could show this, and we would have the confidence of the community to go ahead and possibly pull trigger on a second. I'm sorry for the expression. I'm used to my day job. But go ahead with this process sooner than later. Sooner being after this project is completed.
so does that lend any, we've got down on the worst broken up classroom, we've got down a layer of tongue and groove that we can make permanent. We could either put some vinyl flooring on top of that, or we could just paint it and leave it, use it as we have to, and get us 2 years out. The other 3 rooms are not broken up as bad. From the structural standpoint, does that timeline cause anybody a concern? Given what we know is there now.
I think the only
We
thing
know
that
the one room, the worst room we know is fine, because not only do we have the layer, Scott, right? We've also got that layer plywood. So we know that room is perfectly fine.
You were going to say something, Mike?
Yeah, I think just on a construction thought process is, and Kevin, I agree with you that you want to see success and to go to your community and build off of that success. But at the same time, we're going to be in that building this summer, and then I don't think there's a lot going on in there in the second phase. Is that correct, Bill? in the elementary school. Yeah, so there'll be a summer off of no work in there, and then, maybe the next summer kind of thing. Is that the kind of approach that you're looking at?
Yes, that's where I'm thinking, is that we could be developing that project while the current one that we have out there is going to be moving forward and going on. I'm not saying let's finish one, then have a break. We could be in development stages. I don't necessarily want to go punting that to the community today when we haven't even broke ground on our original.
Yes.
At least that's my take on it. I mean, that's one,
Yeah.
Just.
So Meg, just for, do you have the work that you've done with Christina for the committee's knowledge? Even if you can summarize it?
Basically, we took the cost of the project. If we did all of the second floor as well as the gymnasium, and figured out, after you factor in aid, how much money we'd have to fund out of a capital reserve to have zero tax impact for the whole project. And it comes out to about 700,000, just shy of. If we were to just do the second floor pieces and not do the gym, we'd need about 550,000 in the capital project. Currently, we have just over 500,000 in the capital project, but the issue we run into is that while we didn't necessarily plan on that in the budget, we did include it in the authorization for the current capital project. And typically, before you go to vote on how you're going to fund a project, you need to have those amounts in the capital reserve. So we'd have to get an opinion from bond counsel if we were going to put money from the capital reserve towards this flooring project, if we need to hold out the 500,000 that's currently there for the current project, or if we can get to a point where we can confirm that we're not going to have to use that, if we could use that same 500,000 towards the flooring.
Well, I think
So-
Meg, that sounds like that might drive our timeline a little bit better. When do you think we'll have information on that? Timing of that?
Bond counsel is who? That's Robert's office, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So we'll schedule a meeting with them and with their office and get the details, hopefully within a week.
He can give us his opinion on that, but I don't know that we'd necessarily know how much of the capital reserve we're going to use until at least we get bids back for phase 2 and know what those bids are. And even at that point, there's no guarantee we'd never use the capital reserve. We don't know what they might run into, what we might have on change orders, those sort of things. So I would sooner see us try to start putting more in there with this on our radar, whether it be $200,000 here, $200,000 there, to start to get more in there to build up. And if we don't end up using the amount on the current project, then we've just got more for the one 7 years from now.
Sorry, the computer, I just glitched out. I don't know if my question, go ahead.
As far as the timeline, Kevin, I think the timeline for putting together and designing this project and getting it ready to go to a vote is going to be much shorter than what we're used to, because the last one was a couple of years in the making. We're basically at a point with this one where we could pull together the information for a capital project vote if we needed to. There's not going to be months and months of prep work because it's such a small scope. And we know what it is. We've already got it figured out.
So what I'm thinking, and this may not work, is 2022 comes around, we are wrapping up, or even the end of 2021, we're well enough into our projects to see where our expenditures are versus where we thought they were going to be. To pull together a project then and go out and know exactly what we would have out of our own budgets that we could utilize for that, out of that 500,000 or the other. Does that make sense to anybody else, or is that just?
No, I think it sounds like, Kevin, that's the timeline we're going to be on, approximately. I agree with Meg. It's going to be obviously a shorter turnaround time, and I think we're going to have a lot more confidence in going back to our community when we're midway through a project or have phase 1 completed. Or I agree with all that stuff, Kevin. So I think that's the only way. I don't know. I haven't heard any other solutions as to how we settle this thing out, but it sounds like we're 2 years out with, getting a request in and starting another capital project, project 3.
Unfortunately, the very first step in that project is pretty much to have a vote, because then you do the design and then you do the submission to state ed before you can do construction. So really the vote is our next step, and it's sounding like, you know, the general feeling is we shouldn't go that step until we have some more of the current project completed.
Hey, Scott, just a quick question for you is, if we ended up construction in 23, summer of 23, going backwards, what does that timeline look like?
Well, we'd want to bid that in the winter of 22, 23, you know, that
Yeah.
back it up. So SCD approval would want to be some, say, December timeframe at the latest of
Yeah.
22.
Yep.
So back up, say, four months from that. So you're into, say, July to submit it of 22. We probably would need, what do you think, Bill? Probably to do documents for that, 3 or 4 months, I would think. Something along those lines. So probably early spring to start design, I would think. So I think you would want the bond vote to be no later than, say, March of 22, if you were going to be on that time frame. Does that sound about right, I think?
Be interesting to,
You wouldn't want it any later than that.
so you don't think we could do it with a May budget vote, or maybe it's not a good idea to do it with a budget vote?
Well, you could do it with a May budget vote. That just pushes the timeline, because now we wouldn't have documents done until, say, June, July, August, probably September.
Yeah.
And then you'd be bidding a little bit later in the spring, which is possible. I mean, that's not the end of the world, but it's not ideal. Ideally, you'd be bidding a little bit earlier than that, a few months earlier.
One thing we could do to get over that hurdle, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, the district could decide to go ahead and ask BCA to start the design on those before the May vote. So the design was being done. What that basically means is if we incur costs to do that design and then the project doesn't get improved, we're stuck with those costs. But it would move the timeline if we wanted to vote on it with the budget.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct with that. We can't submit anything to SED until we have well, actually, we can't, that's not true. We could submit even. We can't award bids without public referendum. So that would, typically, most districts don't want to take that risk of, if the vote goes down, then there's cost there. But it's really, you'd probably have to gauge your community and decide if that's something you'd like to do.
Well, and so timeline of the current project, which will lead into the timeline of this, our projection is that we're going to be going to bid on phase 2 in the fall.
Late fall, yeah, late fall, yep.
So we do that, we're going to have a real good understanding of where we are in relation to our current project, and still have time to have this discussion to finalize it, right? If my timeline is right.
Yeah, you really have the 3 major pieces of the project. You have the flood protection, which is going to be bidding here soon.
Right.
Next month. You've got phase 1, which we already have numbers. And then phase, the third phase of it would be late fall.
Well, and next week's a big week for us. Once we get that scan of the roof,
Yep.
and we know where we are with the roof, that's step 1. And then when we get into the phase 2 and we get we get the estimates reconciled, which you the potential need to adjustments.
Mike, could you repeat that? We lost you.
So
Yeah,
where did you lose me?
about 20 seconds ago.
When you were
Okay.
talking
just
about
talking
the
about taking
scan
the phase-
next
yeah.
week.
Yeah, you're talking about.
Okay,
the scan.
so my thought is, right, we get that done. We get the current estimates that you guys are working on for phase 2 reconciled. And then we've got the bids in the fall. We'll have a real good understanding of where we are with this current project in relation to any scope adjustments or relation to any type of reserve that we've got tied to it. Right? So then that can give us a real good picture. I think from what I'm hearing, it seems like, I'm in the same line. I think we need a separate project. We need to time it right. We need to build the community confidence. That's what we've heard from Kevin and Graydon. Miranda, do you agree with that statement?
I do.
Okay. So we've got the board consensus for this evening. I don't hear any danger or concern for structural with the current, now that we know what's there, and with the current plywood that's been applied. If needed, we could apply additional plywood if we felt. We could have you do an additional inspection done during the project to make sure we haven't had any additional deterioration in any of those other rooms. Add additional plywood if needed, so that we can get to the timeline as suggested. If that sounds like a good direction.
Yeah, I would suggest, that sounds fine to us. I think I would suggest that there at least be a visual review of that deck every couple of months or so at a minimum. And just to double check it, make sure it's not, nothing else is happening. So.
Okay. Sound like a plan?
Is that review something we'd be looking to do in-house, or is that something we'd be looking to have somebody come in and do?
We could do it either way. I think we could certainly talk with you about what to look for, and John could look at it as well. It's really just a visual, as it changed from what we've seen before. Take some photographs of it, take a look at it 2 months later. Has things changed? But we could certainly do that too. We're going to be there on site. Mike's team's going to be there, so we certainly can, work that into the project scope.
We know where the deteriorated areas are now. I don't have them documented on paper, but I can go right to them. And yes, we could go every few months and take pictures of them, and now that we've got all the debris cleaned off the ceiling tile, we can, any additional debris there, we can, okay, here's been a problem.
Yep.
And they say that, the hall is almost in the same shape it was when it was put in 1935. And of course, over the rooms on the street side, they aren't in terrible shape. There's a few little problems there, but yeah, we can certainly do that. Just have it scheduled and do it once every 2 or 3 or 4 months.
Well, that's what happens when, and I can say this because it has nothing to do with CNS and BCA, but looking back at the past records of 2 different projects, having people screw and nail and staple through gypsum, probably not the best idea. So that's why we are where we are.
Yeah,
And I think I agree for sure, Dr. McDonald. Do we have a backup plan where it sounded like the timeline to me was looking like a winter 2021 bid to hit Scott's time frame on what his scenario was? Do we prep for that and have that in our back pocket in case somebody says, okay, this is now a red flag, an issue, or all things are good with our phase 2 bidding in the fall, prepare for a November, December timeframe again for the capital outlay project bid? Do we prep for that just in case?
I would suggest that. I would suggest that if we have everything in line with this project coming into next fall with the estimates and then the bidding, that we jump and start moving. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, that's what I thought I was hearing when everybody was talking around. So I would definitely be in favor of that. I think right now we build as much confidence as we can through these phases and get things under control. And if things are rolling well for us and we can make things work, and if Meg is happy with the finances, then we go out as early as winter 2021 for this project.
Yep. And I think what we need to do too, as far as building the confidence to the community, is to do a phase one. When we're completed with phase one, we do some, whether it's a video segment, we do a report out for the community on what's been accomplished and what we've done in phase one and what's to come in phase two. We do a status at that point.
And I
Thank you.
think I agree. I think we touch base on this one too and say, remember the emergencies of the Townsend School, second floor. We put that out now and say, here's what our final solution is for that. We're not adding it to our project because we were very clear with you. We weren't going to expand our scope. This is going to be an oncoming project. It's going to be coming sooner rather than later. I think it would be very good of us to do that for transparency, because it's all pretty much inevitable around the table. This is going to happen. It's just a matter of when.
I think it would be nice to maybe even actually do a capital project update now. The last time we really talked to the public, we weren't planning on doing the roofs this summer. So I don't know that we've really provided that information to say, okay, here's where we're at. This is what you're going to see this summer. And then going into the fall, we could do here's what's been completed. And similar to what we did with this project, even if we could mention as we do an update now that, we're looking into some possible issues at Townsend that might create another project, like get that information out there so people start digesting it. And in the fall, it's not the first time they hear it.
Yeah, I think we should start a calendar, Meg, for outreach and start checking these boxes as to which months we're going to be reporting and what we're going to be doing. I agree with you 100%. You can never give too much information out in these phases. So I agree with you 100%.
I always look at myself, I take away being a school employee and as a taxpayer, if I hear, something's going on with the 35 part of the building, and, people, if we do that fall vote, that November vote seemed to work out so well. And I think and looking back, I think it would for myself too. We only concentrated on just this project to vote on. If we put something out in the fall of, or November of 21 or November of 22 for the Townsend School flooring project and the 35 wing and educate people on it, I don't think you'd have any problem, because I know myself as a taxpayer, yes, if it doesn't really affect my tax base much, I'm going to vote for it.
Well, I'm back with Graydon's thoughts on it too. One of the comments and with Meg, just to echo on that, I think it would be maybe an opportunity too that when we do the bids and we get ready to award, we could award the bids and then also do a kind of a PR thing on this is what phase one looks like and do that rolling update. That way, you definitely maintain transparency then. So we can't be hammered on for that. And then as people start to see equipment coming in and things starting to happen, they know we're gaining ground. And at the end of those steps, start, again, do another press release or whatever, or the video that we did that went through the school, that one there, the drone flights, do something of them natures and just trying to keep it very real and very live. And which would probably even open up a door that once we got into the Townsend School projects, we could touch on that there was some additional things identified over there that we're looking at them to be their own project. And so it doesn't bog the current one down. I mean, we can wordsmith that when we get to it.
One thing I'll just throw out there, and I don't know if this is something you'd want to consider or not, but I know some districts have done like a construction webcam. Like if you're doing a roofing project, they put a camera and here's the project, and it just monitors what's going on. It kind of gives everybody a view of what's going on, like with your site transformation, when you're doing all the parking lots, that might be kind of an interesting thing to see what's happening. Some districts do that, some don't, but that is a way to communicate progress of a project too.
Yep. So as an initial step, what we'll do, we'll plan a May, because we're doing April, correct? We're doing April as bid open are the bid awards, bid openings. May would be the bid awards.
Yep.
Technically, timeline wise. So we'll plan on a May update. That'll be a perfect timing because we'll be leading right into summer. So I'll start drafting something with PJ, and we'll get something kind of skeletoned out and drafted and we'll float it by the facilities committee internally, and work on that piece. And we can decide whether or not we do mention of an identified concern that will be addressed in the future after the completion of this project, or whatever, however we want to do that to identify that need at Townsend, whether it's in this one or whether it's in a fall update or what we want to do. So we'll start working on that, and we'll work together a timeline of a suggest that. Like, work.
Mike,
Yeah, I lost you again for a second. Am I back? I swear I should never leave my office. I always say it. So anyway, we'll work on the communication drips. We'll work on that communication in May, and we'll have the conversations about potential time lapse video before and after. So thank you for that suggestion, Scott.
One other question for you is, what do you think a timeline is from start to finish of the physical work to replace that floor? If you did the entire floor?
We would have to probably work with you closely on that. That, you know, it's going to take the entire summer, and we may have to even talk to you about the possibility of, you know, maybe some other options there too. Because you're going to want those spaces back by that next September. So we'll have to phase it so it starts at a reasonable time with some coordination with, you know, Mike and his team in the district, you know, and then that's how we'll phase it for construction. And that's how they'll bid on it, is on that timeline of when we can get started. So, you know, if we can't get started until the end of June, you know, that gives them that time period to get that work done and completed. And that's how they're going to have to bid on it. But you know, that could be tough. So, you know, we'll have to look into that more. But, you know, it's going to be on what kind of flexibility is there, you know, being the, you know, where it is and where it's located, there might not be the flexibility to start any earlier than until after school's out. And then we might also have to work with you on the flexibility of, you know, if we feel that it can't get done in that time frame, what does it look like for September? You know, and what that flexibility looks like. So, I mean, the bottom line is that if we phase it to get done in the you know, the June to the end of August phasing, then that's, you know, that's how they're bidding the job, and they have to provide the manpower and to accomplish that work. And you guys know that through the work you do. So that's my thoughts. Scott, any further thoughts?
Well, I think that, you know, it's a lot of work to do in a short summer timeframe like that. I would agree with you, Mike. And I think we need to start thinking about that phasing probably sooner rather than later, and come back to the district with, here's some thoughts we have about how to make that all work, and work with the district on what are the possibilities of, could we do shifts where certain rooms are completed sooner, you know, and turned over, and then other work, you know, sort of work our way through like that.
Yep.
So we'll have to figure that out. But it is you know, really in essence, what you're doing is opening up that whole second floor and rebuilding it. So it's a fair amount of work.
Yeah.
So
The one thing I can suggest and offer is I can meet one of our GC project managers on the site, tell him what the scope's going to be, maybe get his idea on a time frame and help us with that. They won't be able to bid on the job because we're the CMs. So, you know, I'm not worried about that part of it, but with their expertise, it would be a great way to say, you know, have somebody come that's going to do the work and say, this is what we think we can do in a time frame of start to finish kind of thing. And I'll start working on that.
Thank you.
Just from when we originally did the floor, the downstairs floors and poured the concrete on it. They started the week of graduation that week, like on a Monday or whatever it was. And I know we were in there putting everything back together on Labor Day weekend so that we could open school. So the downstairs, which is a smaller project, got done in that amount of time, but still the concrete needs, I believe, 28 days to cure.
Yeah.
So it just sits still. So you basically lose 28 days from pour date.
And that's why what, Scott mentioned phasing, and we could phase it to the point where a portion of it is poured, demoed, poured. And as they're working on other areas, that one is curing, and just try to follow behind on that phasing. And that's the, at 1,000-foot level, looking at it right now, that's the way I'm looking at it. And, I'm, like I said, I'll bring in, and John, maybe sometime I can bring them out and we can meet, and maybe we can talk to you about the process that you saw happening on that downstairs, and then maybe get some good expertise on what that might look like.
Okay. And there's still some gyp planking on the first floor too. I think Scott knows that.
Mm-hmm.
And to tell you the truth, that if we were to go ahead with a project like this, it would probably behoove us to get those smaller portions done that are still remain downstairs.
I would tend to agree with that, John. I don't think there's any sense of going through and removing 95% of it out of the building and still having a problem someplace.
Yeah.
If it's something that we can manage to do under one time frame. But honestly, my gut tells me right now that with you two gentlemen's conversation on this, there's a high level of doubt that the 8-week window is enough to do that.
You're correct. Yeah. Such as
Did that come through, Kevin?
Loud and clear.
Where do you know where the stage used to be at the end of the cafeteria, Kevin?
No, I don't recall it.
It's the upper end of the cafeteria now. They're using it for their quarantine room, their isolation room.
Okay.
And that's all still has gyp deck under it. Now the entire cafeteria itself still is the steel decking in concrete. And I believe underneath room 131, or what is it? 131B, I think it is, or 131A, I think they call it. I still think there's some gyp decking there, but not much.
There are some areas along specifically the street side that have gyp under it. We believe, based on where they are under like closet room walls, some of the main walls that are there, and that was partially the reason why it was remaining. It's A, not a high traffic area. B, it was extremely difficult to get to, I would imagine, from a construction deconstruction standpoint. And as well as it looks like, at least from what we can see cross-section wise, that they actually over poured that area to a limited extent. So it's relatively encapsulated. It should be stable the way it is. Again, it's not high traffic. It looks like it's over poured. So at the stage area, I agree. That is all existing, just original old stuff. That would be very good to be able to do. But to everybody's point, I just don't know if we're going to be able to get that, get a handle on that as well as everything else at the same time.
Yeah. Now, just a quick question about the gymnasium floor. That floor is only, 16, 17 years old. Would that, if you had to replace the deck under that, would you take the flooring up and then put that 5/4 full flooring back down? after it was poured, or would you have to go with all new gym floorboards?
I'm not sure. I guess we'd really have to look at that and see
Yeah,
how easily that could come up. You know, could it come up without being damaged to such an extent that you couldn't put it back down?
right.
Maybe it could, but we'd have to probably test that theory a little bit to get
Yeah.
a good handle on it.
Cause see, that floor's never even been sanded. That's still the full 5/4.
So that sounds like that's one of those spots right there that you would plan on replacing the floor and hope for the grace that you didn't have to.
Yeah,
Right. Or maybe you can reuse most of it and only have to,
Right.
patch in
Right.
spots.
Or that's a section that we hold off, and monitor the deterioration is not what it is upstairs. And we monitor it and get to the 7-year mark with the next big project.
mhm,
Yeah, I think Dr. McDonald's going to have the win on that one, because once you touch that from a contract standpoint, I think it's going to be tough to put that back down. I think your contractor will spend more time trying to save it than it's worth actually their labor putting it back. So we also understood that the actual sheer weight of that was actually helping the situation there with the trusses. So, I think I agree with Dr. McDonald. We put that off to a bigger project if it's possible. And then obviously logically, you're going to phase that building, phase 1 upstairs, phase 2 downstairs, and try to probably tackle it that way. So.
The other thing that just popped into my mind as we were talking about the gym, if you don't do the gym, maybe that is an area where you could set up a few temporary classrooms too, if the project was going to run, into the fall, for example. You could do some things like that, because we've done that in other projects. I know, Mike, you've probably done that as well. So those are some of the things that we want to think about scheduling it.
Oh, if we haven't learned anything through COVID, we've learned places to stick classrooms. So we're certainly ready to roll on that. Yeah, I think we've got some direction, correct? I don't know if there's anything else to discuss. Meg, anything else from your standpoint? I appreciate the discussion. This to me was very helpful. Okay.
Well, not to be rude, but if that is that, I've got a 7:00 meeting to run to.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think we're good.
okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a great